Good evening, night owls, and welcome to Whisper Crowley. Tonight, I will guide you into a world of darkness, hoping to help you relax and unwind. Perhaps some of you will even drift into a haunting yet soothing sleep. Before we begin, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. And now we begin. What if the shadows that lingered at the edge of your vision were not just tricks of the light? What if they were something more, something waiting for the right moment to strike? It all started one evening when I found myself walking home after a long shift at the diner. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Streetlights flickered intermittently, casting pools of yellow light that barely penetrated the encroaching darkness. I could hear the faint rustle of leaves and the distant hum of traffic, but there was something else lurking beneath those sounds, a low, indistinct whisper that sent shivers down my spine. My name is Alex, and I've always prided myself on being a rational person. I'm not one to jump to conclusions or let my imagination run wild. But that night, as I hurried down the narrow alley behind the diner, I felt an undeniable presence, an unseen weight pressing against me. It was as if I was being watched, and that thought alone was enough to quicken my pace. As I walked, I caught a faint scent, a strange, musty odor that made my stomach churn. It was not the typical smell of the city. This was more like damp earth mixed with something burnt. I shook my head, trying to clear the uneasy feeling that had settled over me. Just my imagination, I told myself. Nothing more. But as I turned the corner onto a more familiar street, the sensation of being watched intensified. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. Instead, I saw nothing. Just the empty street, the dimly lit windows of closed shops, and the distant sound of a dog barking. I tried to convince myself that it was just fatigue playing tricks on my mind. Once home, I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, breathing a sigh of relief. The small apartment felt like a fortress, safe from the outside world. I flicked on the lights, banishing the shadows that seemed to cling to the corners. But even in the comfort of my living room, a sense of unease lingered. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I tossed and turned, trying to find a comfortable position, but sleep eluded me. Instead, I found myself staring at the ceiling, lost in thoughts of the strange happenings in the city. Whispers of a ghostly figure known as the Haunter circulated among the locals, a spectral being said to wander the streets at night, preying on those who ventured too close to its domain. The tales were harmless, I thought. Just urban legends meant to scare children. But as I lay there, wide awake, I couldn't help but wonder if there was some truth to them. Perhaps my mind was just playing tricks on me, but what if? As the night dragged on, I finally drifted into a fitful sleep, plagued by dreams filled with shifting shadows and echoing whispers. I awoke the next morning, sunlight filtering through the curtains, yet the remnants of unease still clung to me. I tried to shake it off, attributing it to a lack of sleep. Later that day, I met up with my friend Mia at our usual coffee shop. The place buzzed with conversation, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air. We settled into a booth, and as we chatted about our mundane lives, I couldn't help but bring up the rumors of the Haunter. "Have you heard about it?" I asked, half jokingly. Mia raised an eyebrow. "You mean that silly ghost story?" Come on, Alex. It's just a myth to keep people out of the old parts of the city. Maybe, I replied, but I could feel the unease creeping back. But what if there's something more to it? What if it's not just a story? She laughed it off, but the laughter faded when a strange sound caught our attention. It was a soft thud, followed by an unsettling silence. We both turned toward the window, where a figure stood just outside, cloaked in shadow. I squinted, trying to make out the features, but the sunlight cast a glare, obscuring any details. The figure seemed to shift, as if uncertain, before slowly turning and disappearing down the street. My heart raced, and I glanced at Mia. Her expression mirrored my own confusion. "Did you see that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the chatter of the cafe. "Yeah," she said, her eyes wide. "That was strange." We exchanged worried glances, the earlier levity gone. The shadow of the haunter loomed larger in my mind, and I felt a growing dread deep within me. As the day unfolded, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something that would change everything. That night I returned home, the weight of the day pressing down on me. I tried to distract myself with a movie, but the flickering light only accentuated the shadows dancing across my walls. The whispers of the haunter echoed in my mind, growing louder, more insistent. Then came the knock. It was soft at first, almost hesitant, but it grew louder, more urgent. My heart raced as I approached the door. I paused, hand hovering over the knob. What if it was nothing? What if it was the haunter come to claim me? I took a deep breath, steeling myself against the fear that threatened to consume me. Slowly I opened the door, peering into the darkened hallway. Nothing, just silence. I stepped outside, peering into the shadows that danced in the corridor. My instincts screamed at me to retreat, but curiosity pulled me forward. As I turned to close the door, I caught a glimpse of movement from the corner of my eye, a flicker of white in the darkness, almost ghostly. And then it was gone. I slammed the door shut, heart pounding, breath quickening. I leaned against the cool wood, mind racing with possibilities. The haunter was no longer just a story, it was real, and it was watching. I needed to understand what was happening. I needed answers. But the shadows had begun to stretch deeper into my life, and I feared that uncovering the truth might come at a price I was not ready to pay. The silence in my apartment was deafening. Each tick of the clock echoed in my mind, reminding me that time was slipping away. I leaned against the door, my heart still racing from the brief encounter with the unknown. What had I seen? Was it a trick of the light or something more sinister? I took a moment to collect my thoughts, pushing myself away from the door and forcing myself to sit on the couch. The faint smell of old books and dust lingered in the air, a stark contrast to the unsettling atmosphere that enveloped me. I glanced around, feeling the familiar comfort of my space gradually morphing into something alien and threatening. I needed to learn more about the haunter. My curiosity was stronger than my fear. I grabbed my laptop from the coffee table, fingers trembling slightly as I opened it. The screen flickered to life, illuminating my dark thoughts. I began to search for information, local legends, newspaper articles, anything that could shed light on the figure that haunted the city's shadows. My fingers danced over the keyboard, typing phrases like haunter urban legend and ghost sightings in the city. Each click of the mouse sent a shiver down my spine. As I scrolled through the results, I found various accounts of people who had encountered the haunter. The stories were chilling. Some claimed to have seen it standing at the end of dark alleys. Others spoke of whispers that seemed to follow them home. The most disturbing accounts detailed a sensation of dread that enveloped them, leaving them paralyzed with fear. One article caught my attention, a detailed report from a local historian. It described how the haunter was said to be the spirit of a man who had vanished decades ago under mysterious circumstances. Rumors hinted at a connection to an old abandoned building on the outskirts of the city, an eerie structure long rumored to be cursed. Suddenly the air felt thick, as if the walls were closing in. I needed to go there. I had to confront the source of the legend. I marked the address of the building and took a deep breath, trying to steady the growing anxiety in my chest. As the night wore on, my resolve strengthened. I gathered a flashlight, a notebook, and my phone, preparing for whatever awaited me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into something far greater than a simple ghost story. The haunter was real, and its presence was only growing stronger. The clock struck midnight as I stepped outside, the moon casting an eerie glow over the deserted streets. The chill in the air gripped me, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer, beckoning me toward the unknown. Each step I took felt like a journey into a realm that had long been forgotten. The address led me to the outskirts of the city, where the buildings grew sparse and the roads cracked under the weight of neglect. I could see the silhouette of the abandoned structure looming ahead, its broken windows like empty eyes watching me approach. As I neared the entrance, an unsettling feeling washed over me. The air felt charged with something unseen. I flicked on my flashlight, the beam slicing through the darkness. The light danced across the crumbling facade, revealing faded graffiti and shattered glass. I hesitated at the threshold, the door hanging ajar as if inviting me in. My heart pounded in my chest, a relentless reminder of the fear that gripped me. But curiosity was a potent force, urging me to cross the threshold. I stepped inside, the floor creaking underfoot. The musty smell hit me like a wave, a mix of damp wood and decay. The darkness enveloped me, broken only by the beam of my flashlight. I could hear the faint sound of dripping water echoing somewhere deep within the building, creating a rhythm that seemed to sync with my racing heart. As I explored the dimly lit interior, I took note of the remnants of a past life, discarded furniture, torn curtains swaying like ghosts in the draft, and the eerie stillness that hung in the air. I felt the weight of history pressing down on me, as if the walls themselves held secrets waiting to be uncovered. I made my way to a staircase that spiraled upwards, its wooden steps worn and unstable. A whisper of wind brushed against my skin, sending a chill down my spine. I paused, glancing back at the entrance. My rational mind fought against the instinctual urge to turn back, but something deeper compelled me to press on. The upper floor was shrouded in darkness, the beam of my flashlight barely penetrating the gloom. As I stepped onto the landing, I noticed a door at the end of the hallway, slightly ajar. It seemed to beckon me, and despite the growing fear in my gut, I approached it. With a hesitant push, I opened the door. Inside was a room filled with dust-covered furniture, a thick layer of grime covering every surface. In the center stood an old mirror, its surface cracked and cloudy. As I approached it, I caught a glimpse of my reflection, pale and anxious, eyes wide with anticipation. But then something caught my eye. Behind me, in the shadows of the room, I saw movement. A fleeting silhouette, almost imperceptible, darted out of sight. My heart raced and I spun around, flashlight beam flickering wildly. "Hello," I called, my voice echoing in the stillness. The only response was the sound of my own breath, rapid and shallow. I felt an overwhelming urge to run, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. Then I heard it, a whisper, soft and low, curling around me like smoke. "Leave, while you still can." Panic surged through me. I backed away slowly, heart pounding in my ears. The shadows seemed to deepen, and I felt an oppressive weight pressing against me. I turned and bolted for the door, fear propelling me forward. As I raced down the staircase, I could feel the air shift behind me, as if something was pursuing me, desperate to keep me in its grasp. The whispers intensified, a cacophony of voices rising around me. I burst through the front door, stumbling into the night, gasping for breath. I didn't stop running until I reached the safety of the streetlight's glow. The haunting whispers faded into the distance, but the fear lingered in my chest. I glanced back at the building, its darkened windows now resembling hollow eyes watching me leave. That night I realized the haunter was not just a story, it was a living nightmare. And I had unwittingly stepped into its world. I knew that this was only the beginning, and I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The night air was thick with a sense of foreboding as I stumbled away from the abandoned building, my heart still racing from the fear that clung to me like a second skin. Each step I took felt heavy, weighed down by the dread of what I had just experienced. The shadows of the city loomed around me, more pronounced now, as if they were alive and aware of my presence. I turned back, catching a glimpse of the structure that had swallowed my courage. Its crumbling facade stood in stark contrast to the streetlights illuminating the sidewalk, a reminder that I had ventured too far into the unknown. The haunter was real, and it was waiting for me. Once home, I locked the door behind me, the click of the latch sounding unnervingly final. I leaned against the door, closing my eyes for a moment to catch my breath. The remnants of the whispers still echoed in my mind, a chilling reminder of the warning I had heard. I knew I couldn't sleep. The adrenaline coursing through my veins had transformed into a gnawing anxiety, urging me to understand what had happened. I poured myself a glass of water, the cool liquid momentarily soothing my frayed nerves. But I needed more than just comfort, I needed answers. Sitting at my desk, I opened my laptop again, determined to delve deeper into the legend of the haunter. My fingers danced over the keyboard, my mind racing as I searched for any mention of the warnings that others had received, similar to my own. The historian's account was a good starting point, but I needed something more tangible. As I scrolled through forums and blog posts, I discovered a thread where locals discussed their experiences with the haunter. One post caught my attention. A woman claimed that her friend had disappeared after entering the very same building I had explored. Panic surged through me as I read her words, the chilling realization that I might not be the only one drawn into this nightmare. The last thing he said was that he could hear someone calling his name, the post read. Then he just vanished. No one has seen him since. My skin prickled at the thought. Had the haunter taken him? I felt a deep sense of foreboding wash over me, the implications of the legend becoming terrifyingly clear. This was not just a ghost story, it was a warning, a call to stay away. But why had I been so foolish? Just then my phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a text from my friend, Jamie. Hey, are you okay? I heard you went to that old building. People are saying it's haunted. Don't go back there alone. I quickly typed back, trying to mask my rising anxiety. I'm fine, just checking it out. Nothing happened, but even as I sent the message, I felt a knot of guilt in my stomach. I was lying, and deep down, I knew it. After a few moments of back and forth, Jamie's texts grew increasingly worried. Seriously, be careful. That place has a bad vibe. I'll come over tomorrow, okay? I sighed, grateful for the offer of company. As much as I wanted to face this alone, I could feel the weight of my fear pressing down on me. I needed someone who could help me process this madness, someone who could ground me in reality. When I finally crawled into bed, sleep evaded me. I tossed and turned, haunted by flashes of the dark figure I had seen in the building, the cold air wrapping around me like a shroud. The whispers grew louder in my mind, the threat of the haunter lurking just beyond my consciousness. I wondered if I had truly escaped, or if it was merely waiting for the right moment to strike. Morning light filtered through the curtains, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I woke up groggy, but there was a renewed sense of determination coursing through me. Jamie was right. I couldn't face this alone. After a quick breakfast, I decided to take a stroll through the city, hoping to clear my head. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I glanced over my shoulder frequently, the lingering unease from the previous night still clinging to me like a shadow. I reached a small cafe where I often met Jamie. As I sipped my coffee, I felt a surge of anxiety mixed with anticipation. I needed to confront this fear, to piece together the mystery of the haunter. When Jamie arrived, she immediately sensed my tension. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said with a half smile, but her eyes were serious. What really happened last night? I recounted my experience in the abandoned building, leaving out the parts that felt too surreal, too disturbing to share. I explained the whispers, the silhouette, the sense of dread that had enveloped me. Jamie listened intently, her expression shifting from concern to disbelief. That sounds insane, she finally said, shaking her head. But I've heard some stories too. I mean, people talk about the haunter all the time. What if it's not just an urban legend? What if there's something to it? Her words resonated with me. That's what I'm afraid of, I admitted, feeling the weight of her understanding. I want to know more, but I also feel like I'm stepping into something dangerous. Jamie placed her hand over mine, grounding me. We'll figure it out together. Maybe we can go back to that building together. If there's anything there, we'll face it. A surge of gratitude washed over me. I felt stronger with Jamie by my side. Okay, I said, steeling myself. Let's do it. We finished our coffee and set a plan to return to the haunter's lair that very evening. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, I felt a mix of dread and excitement. The abandoned building loomed in the distance as we approached, now a silhouette against the darkening sky. The air felt electric, charged with anticipation and fear. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever awaited us inside would test us in ways we could never expect. As we crossed the threshold once more, the door creaked open, revealing the darkness within. I turned to Jamie, our eyes locking in silent understanding. Whatever lay ahead, we would face it together. But deep down, a nagging fear remained. What if the haunter was more than a mere legend? What if it was a force beyond our comprehension, waiting to draw us into its eternal night? The heavy door groaned as it swung open, revealing the darkened interior of the abandoned building. A musty scent filled the air, mingling with the faintest hint of dampness. I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest as the memories of the previous night flooded back. The whispers, the shadow, what awaited us inside. Jamie stepped forward, her determination unwavering. "We can do this," she said, her voice steady but soft. I admired her courage, even as the anxiety tightened its grip around my throat. Together we crossed the threshold, the door slamming shut behind us with a resounding finality that echoed through the empty halls. We stood in the entryway, the remnants of crumbling wallpaper peeling away, exposing the cold, bare walls beneath. The darkness seemed to pulse around us, thick and heavy. I flicked on my flashlight, the beam slicing through the gloom, illuminating fragments of broken furniture and shattered glass strewn across the floor. "This place feels alive," Jamie murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like it's watching us." I nodded, unable to articulate the sensation creeping along my spine. Each creak of the floorboards beneath our feet sounded amplified, resonating in the silence that enveloped us. My heart raced, not just from fear, but from the weight of the unknown that loomed before us. As we moved deeper into the building, I could feel the atmosphere shifting. The air grew colder, almost biting, and an unsettling stillness surrounded us, broken only by the distant sound of dripping water. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see the shadowy figure from last night lurking just out of sight. "Let's check out the basement," Jamie suggested, her adventurous spirit shining through. I hesitated, but the pull of curiosity was too strong to resist. We made our way toward the narrow staircase leading down, the wooden steps creaking ominously under our weight. Reaching the bottom, I shone my flashlight around the damp, dark space. The basement was filled with debris, old furniture, rusted tools, and remnants of what looked like long-abandoned belongings. A chill ran down my spine as I spotted a broken mirror leaning against the wall, its surface cracked and tarnished. "What do you think happened here?" Jamie asked, kneeling to inspect an old trunk partially hidden beneath a pile of dust-covered sheets. I shrugged, my mind racing with theories. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had transpired in this place was rooted in something dark and twisted. Suddenly, a soft noise made me freeze. I strained my ears, catching the faint sound of whispers, barely discernible but undeniably present. They seemed to float around us, echoing off the walls like a taunting chorus. My breath quickened, and I felt the room close in around us. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Jamie's eyes widened in alarm, and she nodded slowly. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, swirling like a tempest in the air. I gripped my flashlight tighter, its beam flickering slightly as if responding to the mounting tension. "We should leave," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but the urgency in my tone betrayed my fear. Just then, a loud bang echoed from the far corner of the basement, causing us both to jump. My heart raced as I turned toward the source of the noise, the beam of my flashlight shaking in my hand. It illuminated a door slightly ajar, swinging ever so gently as if inviting us closer. "What do you think is behind that door?" Jamie asked, her voice a mixture of curiosity and trepidation. I hesitated, the fear pooling in my stomach, but the desire to uncover the truth pushed me forward. We approached the door cautiously, every instinct screaming at us to turn back. With a deep breath, I pushed it open wider, revealing a small, dimly lit room beyond. Inside, the air felt different, thicker, charged with an energy that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. The walls were lined with shelves, filled with dusty books and yellowed papers. As we stepped inside, I noticed a table in the center, cluttered with what looked like old photographs and handwritten notes. I scanned the room and my heart sank as I realized that these were not mere relics. They were remnants of lives once lived, stories waiting to be unearthed. "Look at this," Jamie said, picking up a photograph. It was faded, but the image showed a group of people standing in front of the very building we were in. Their expressions were solemn, almost haunted. I moved closer, studying the faces in the photo. "These people, they look like they were part of something significant," I murmured, a chill racing down my spine. The whispers grew louder, rising to a crescendo that reverberated in my skull. Suddenly, Jamie gasped, dropping the photo as she stumbled back. "What's happening?" I turned to her, confusion etched on my face. "What do you mean?" Her eyes were wide with fear, and she pointed toward the far wall. "Look." I followed her gaze and felt my blood run cold. The shadows in the corner of the room seemed to swirl and coalesce, forming an indistinct shape that hovered just out of reach of the light. My breath caught in my throat as I realized the figure was taking form, tall, dark, and menacing, its presence radiating an aura of despair. The whispers morphed into anguished cries, filling the room with a cacophony of torment. "We have to get out," I shouted, grabbing Jamie's arm. We bolted for the door, but as we turned, the figure lunged forward, its form becoming clearer, a face twisted in anguish and rage. Time slowed as I felt the overwhelming weight of terror pressing down on me. I could hardly breathe, the air thick with dread. I heard Jamie's voice in the distance, calling for me, but it felt muffled, like I was trapped underwater. "Run!" I screamed, shoving the door open with all my strength. We burst out into the hallway, our footsteps pounding against the floor as we raced toward the exit. The whispers transformed into a deafening roar behind us, and I could feel the haunter closing in. I glanced back just as the dark figure surged forward, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "Faster," I urged, my lungs burning as we sprinted up the stairs. With each step, I could feel the weight of the haunter's presence, like a shadow looming just behind us, ready to strike. We burst through the front door and stumbled into the cool night air, gasping for breath. The weight lifted as we crossed the threshold, and I turned to see the building standing ominously against the night sky, the whispers fading into silence. We made it," Jamie panted, her face pale but determined. But deep down, I knew this was far from over. The haunter was not done with us yet. We had unearthed something, awakened a force that could not be ignored. As we stood there catching our breath, a chilling realization set in. The true horror of the haunter lay not just in its existence, but in the secrets it guarded, secrets we were now inexorably tied to. I glanced back at the building, its dark windows seeming to watch us as we stumbled away. The city felt different now, darker, more dangerous. And I couldn't shake the feeling that the haunter was still watching, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. As we walked away, the shadows danced behind us, and I knew that our journey had only just begun. The chill of the night air was a stark contrast to the heat radiating from my racing heart. Jamie and I walked in silence. The only sound was our hurried footsteps echoing off the cracked pavement. The street lamps flickered ominously, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out for us. I could still feel the weight of the haunter's gaze lingering in the back of my mind, an unshakable presence that gnawed at my resolve. "Do you think it's gone?" Jamie finally broke the silence, her voice trembling slightly. I could see the fear etched on her face, illuminated by the dim glow of the streetlights. "I don't know," I replied, trying to keep my tone steady. "But I don't want to find out." The truth was, I felt a creeping dread that the encounter had only marked the beginning of something much darker. My thoughts spiraled back to the photograph we had found, the faces of those who had stood before us in that building, their expressions hauntingly sorrowful. What had happened to them? What secrets did they carry, and how were they connected to the entity we had encountered? We turned a corner, and I glanced back at the looming structure one last time. The building stood like a silent sentinel, its windows like dark, hollow eyes watching our every move. "We need to figure out what that place was," I said, my voice firming with determination. "There has to be more information about the people in that photograph." "Are you suggesting we go back?" Jamie's eyes widened, a mix of horror and disbelief. "Not back, not yet," I clarified quickly. "We need to research first. Find out who they were, what happened there. We can't just walk away and pretend it didn't happen." "Fine," she sighed, resignation evident in her tone. "But I'm not going in there again without a plan, and maybe some sort of weapon." I chuckled lightly, though the laughter felt hollow. "Agreed. Let's head to the library tomorrow. Maybe we can dig up some records." As we walked, the atmosphere shifted. The city felt alive, but not in a comforting way. It was as if something was stirring, as if the streets themselves held secrets just beneath the surface. The shadows lengthened, and every rustle of leaves seemed to echo with whispers, reminding me of the voices that had haunted us in the basement. By the time we reached my apartment, the weight of the night pressed heavily upon me. I closed the door behind us and leaned against it, taking a moment to catch my breath. The familiar space felt foreign now, tinged with the remnants of fear that clung to me. "I'll grab some coffee," Jamie said, moving toward the kitchen. I nodded absently, still lost in my thoughts. As she busied herself with the kettle, I wandered to my desk, where I kept my notes from previous research projects. The photographs. I pulled them from the drawer and spread them out before me. The group stood in front of the building, looking solemn and weary. The more I stared at their faces, the more they seemed to draw me in, their eyes filled with unspoken stories. "Here," Jamie said, placing a steaming cup of coffee beside me. I looked up to see her watching me with concern. You look like you've seen a ghost. Maybe I have, I replied, unable to suppress the shiver that ran down my spine. We need to figure this out, but we need to be careful. Agree. I think we should also try to talk to some locals, I suggested, sipping my coffee. The warmth spread through me, a small comfort against the creeping chill of dread. Maybe someone remembers the building or the people in the photo. As we made plans, the atmosphere felt heavy with anticipation, as if the very walls of my apartment were holding their breath, waiting for what would come next. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the precipice of something enormous, a revelation that would uncover truths far darker than we could imagine. That night, sleep evaded me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the city outside. Every creak of the building seemed amplified, as if the shadows were alive, whispering secrets in the dark. My mind raced with thoughts of the haunter, the building, and the people trapped within its walls. What if we unleash something by digging too deep? The thought curled around my mind like a viper, squeezing tighter with each passing moment. I forced myself to breathe, to calm the whirlwind of fear swirling inside me. When dawn broke, casting a soft light into my room, I felt both exhausted and resolute. We needed to confront whatever darkness lay ahead. Jamie and I had come too far to turn back now. As we made our way to the library, the city was waking up. The streets buzzed with life, a stark contrast to the eerie silence of the night before. But beneath the surface, I could still feel the undercurrents of unease. At the library, we sifted through records, old newspapers, and city archives. Hours slipped by as we searched for anything related to the building and the faces in the photograph. Each discovery brought us closer, yet deepened the sense of dread that gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jamie unearthed a faded article tucked away in a dusty file. "Look at this," she called, excitement mingling with trepidation in her voice. I leaned closer, my heart racing. The article detailed a tragic fire that had consumed the building decades ago, claiming several lives. The victims were identified, their names matching those of the people in the photograph. A sense of foreboding washed over me as I read the details, how the fire had erupted under mysterious circumstances, how witnesses spoke of strange occurrences leading up to that fateful night. "The haunter," I murmured, the pieces clicking into place. "Oh, it's them, the spirits of those who died in the fire." Jamie's face paled as she absorbed the information. "You think they're trapped, that they're reaching out to us?" I nodded slowly, a chill creeping down my spine. They could be trying to tell us something, warn us. As the weight of our discovery settled over us, I knew we had to return to that building. This was no longer just a curiosity, it was a calling. We needed to confront the haunter, to uncover the truth of what had happened and what it wanted from us. "Are you ready?" I asked, trying to mask my own trepidation. "Let's do it," Jamie replied, her voice firm despite the fear that flickered in her eyes. With that, we made our plans. The shadows in the city seemed to grow longer as we prepared for our return to the heart of the mystery, the pulse of darkness that awaited us in the depths of the uncharted haunter. I hope you enjoyed the first story. If you did, don't forget to leave a like, but if I didn't do my job well, feel free to give it a thumbs down. Either way, drop a comment and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, let's continue. What if the storm wasn't just a storm? What if it carried whispers of the past, echoes of something far more sinister? As the howling wind rattled the windows of my small apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that the answer lay somewhere within the swirling snowflakes outside. The city was cloaked in white, a seemingly tranquil scene that belied the unease brewing in my chest. I glanced around the room, the flickering candle casting shadows that danced like restless spirits on the walls. My name is Ethan, and I'm a freelance writer, often lost in my thoughts, prone to imagination's dark recesses. But tonight there was something different. It felt as though the storm itself was alive, watching, waiting. With every gust of wind, I heard more than just the sound of winter. There was an odd resonance, a low hum that sent shivers down my spine. I peered out the window, squinting against the fierce snow. In the dim light, the street lamps flickered, illuminating the swirling white, yet casting strange, elongated shadows that crept along the ground. I shook my head, trying to dispel the sense of foreboding. It was just the wind. But as the night deepened, the atmosphere thickened with an unshakable tension. The wind howled more fiercely, rattling the panes like fingers tapping insistently. I tried to focus on my writing, but the words eluded me, slipping away like the snow outside. My mind was consumed by an unsettling thought. What if the legends were true? The old tales of a ghost that roamed the city during winter storms, seeking something lost, haunting those who crossed its path. Suddenly a loud bang echoed from the kitchen. I jumped, my heart racing. Was it just the wind? Or was it something more? I got up, hesitating for a moment before making my way to the kitchen. The shadows seemed to elongate, flickering and twisting as I moved. When I reached the doorway, I noticed the window was wide open, snow piling up on the sill. My heart sank. I was sure I had closed it before. I stepped forward to shut it, and as I did, a cold breeze swept through the room, wrapping around me like icy fingers. I shivered and pulled my jacket tighter around me, but the chill wasn't just from the outside. It felt as if something was in the room with me, something watching. Get a grip, Ethan, I whispered to myself, trying to dismiss the creeping fear. It's just a storm. I closed the window and locked it, feeling a momentary relief. But as I turned back to the living room, I caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye. I spun around, but nothing was there. Just the shadows swaying softly with the candlelight. I returned to the couch, trying to steady my breathing. I thought about calling a friend, but who would understand? I felt isolated in my fear, a prisoner of my own mind. The storm outside raged on, the wind shrieking in fury as if it were alive. I picked up my pen, attempting to write, to ground myself in reality. But the page remained blank, taunting me. Hours passed, and the storm only grew more intense. The wind whipped against the walls like a wild animal, scratching at the surface, demanding to be let in. I stood up again, pacing the room, hoping to dispel the thick tension that hung in the air. As I walked past the window, I paused. Outside, the snow danced wildly, and through the haze I thought I saw a figure, a silhouette standing in the middle of the street, motionless against the backdrop of white. My heart raced. Was it real or just my imagination playing tricks? I leaned closer, squinting to see better. The figure was shrouded in darkness, blending with the shadows of the storm. Suddenly it turned slightly, and I felt an icy wave of dread wash over me. I staggered back, my breath catching in my throat. "What are you?" I whispered, half expecting an answer. But the figure remained silent, the wind howling in its place. I felt a strange pull, a compulsion to go outside, to confront whatever this presence was. But every instinct screamed at me to stay away. I grabbed my phone, my fingers trembling as I considered calling for help. But what could I say? "Hey, there's a ghost outside." No one would take me seriously. I put the phone down, my mind racing with possibilities, every scenario playing out like a scene from a horror film. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure was gone. The storm continued its chaotic dance, but the sense of being watched lingered. I sank back onto the couch, wrapping my arms around my knees. I tried to convince myself that it was just the isolation of winter playing tricks on me. Yet as the night wore on, the whispers of the storm grew louder, melding into an unsettling symphony that echoed my fears. The shadows deepened, and I felt a chill in the air that spoke of something ancient and unknowable. Something was coming, and I could feel it drawing closer. The winter wind carried secrets, and I was about to uncover them. But at what cost? I could only wait and hope that when morning came, the storm would have passed, taking with it whatever dark presence had settled in the corners of my mind. Morning light struggled to penetrate the thick veil of clouds that hung low in the sky, casting a muted glow over the city. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the frost-laden window, my heart still racing from the events of the previous night. The storm had subsided, but the remnants of that chilling encounter clung to me like a second skin. As I stood up, my legs felt heavy, as if weighed down by the secrets of the night. I shook off the remnants of sleep and forced myself to step into the kitchen, the familiar sounds of the coffee maker offering a semblance of normalcy. The aroma of brewing coffee wafted through the air, yet I could still feel the unease swirling within me. I sipped my coffee, the warmth spreading through my body, but my mind was far from calm. The figure outside my window haunted my thoughts. Was it just my imagination? Or had I truly seen something? I tried to rationalize it, convincing myself that the storm had played tricks on my mind. But deep down, I knew I had felt a presence, something that transcended mere imagination. I decided to take a walk, to clear my head and face the remnants of the storm. As I stepped outside, the world appeared transformed. The snow blanketed everything in a pristine layer, softening the edges of reality. Yet the silence was unsettling. The usual morning sounds of the city were muffled, as if the world was holding its breath. I trudged down the sidewalk, my boots crunching on the fresh snow. The air was crisp, biting at my cheeks, but I welcomed the cold, hoping it would bring clarity. Each step felt heavy, burdened by the lingering fear of the night. I glanced around, half expecting to see the figure lurking in the shadows, but the street was deserted. As I walked, I began to notice subtle details. The way the branches of the trees swayed against the gray sky, the odd patterns the wind left in the snow, swirling in hypnotic spirals. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I quickened my pace, seeking the comfort of familiarity in a nearby cafe. When I entered, the warmth enveloped me like a hug. I ordered a coffee and found a corner table, grateful for the bustling atmosphere. People chatted, laughter filled the air, and for a moment I felt a semblance of normalcy return. Yet the haunting image of the figure remained at the forefront of my mind. I pulled out my notebook, determined to write down everything that had happened. As I scribbled furiously, a woman sat down at the table next to mine. She appeared to be in her 40s, with an air of calm about her. I glanced at her, noticing her piercing blue eyes that seemed to hold a depth of understanding. "Cold out there, isn't it?" she said, breaking the silence. I nodded, still hesitant. "Yeah, the storm was pretty wild last night." Her expression shifted slightly, as if she knew something I didn't. "You're not the only one who noticed it, you know." I furrowed my brow, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "The figure," she said softly, leaning closer. I saw it too. A chill ran down my spine. "Are you dead?" She nodded, her voice dropping to a whisper. "In the storm, right. It appears when the wind howls the loudest. They say it's looking for something or someone." "What do you know about it?" I asked, my heart racing. "Legends have been passed down through generations. They say it's a spirit tied to the land, a ghost of someone who was lost in the winter many years ago. It's been seen in storms, searching for a way to find peace." I leaned in, captivated. "Do you think it's dangerous?" Her eyes softened. "It's more sorrowful than dangerous. But it feeds off fear. If you're afraid, it's drawn to you." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling heavily in my stomach. "What can I do?" "Find out what it wants," she replied. "It won't rest until it's discovered the truth. But you must be cautious. It can manipulate your thoughts, turning your fears against you." I nodded, absorbing her words. The thought of confronting this entity was daunting, but I felt a strange pull, a desire to uncover the truth behind the figure. "How do I start?" "Look for signs. The wind will guide you. Listen closely and don't dismiss the whispers," she said, her gaze piercing into mine. "But remember, what you seek may not be what you expect." With that, she stood up and walked away, leaving me in a whirlwind of thoughts. The cafe buzzed around me, but I felt detached, my mind racing with possibilities. I glanced outside, the snow still swirling, the wind howling gently, as if beckoning me to follow. I finished my coffee and left the cafe, stepping back into the cold. The world felt different now, charged with a sense of purpose. I walked slowly, my heart pounding, ready to face whatever awaited me in the depths of winter's embrace. As I ventured deeper into the city, the whispers of the wind seemed to call my name, urging me forward into the unknown. With each step, the shadows deepened, and I felt the chilling anticipation of the storm begin to stir once more. The ghost of the winter wind was not done with me yet, and the journey had only just begun. The biting cold seemed to seep into my bones as I stepped further into the heart of the city. Snow crunched beneath my boots, a stark reminder of the winter's grip, yet I felt an insistent warmth growing within me, a mix of determination and fear. The whispers in the wind had ignited something deep inside, an unquenchable thirst for answers. The streets were lined with tall, aging buildings, their facades etched with stories of the past. As I walked, I noticed the way the snow settled on the window sills, creating delicate patterns that mirrored the swirling flurries outside. The city, usually bustling with life, felt eerily quiet, as if it too were holding its breath in anticipation of what was to come. With each step, the unease gnawed at me. I replayed the woman's words in my mind. The wind will guide you. What did that mean? I had to make sense of this encounter, to piece together the fragments of the past. As I approached the park, I felt an overwhelming urge to enter. It was a place I often visited, a sanctuary amidst the chaos of city life. But today it felt different, foreboding. The trees stood tall and barren, their skeletal branches reaching toward the gray sky like fingers grasping for salvation. I made my way along the winding paths, the crunch of snow underfoot echoing in the stillness. As I ventured deeper, a sudden gust of wind swirled around me, carrying with it a whisper that sent chills down my spine. Help me. I paused, heart racing, scanning the area for the source of the voice. The park was empty, the benches dusted with untouched snow. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. Was this the wind speaking to me, or was my mind playing tricks? I pressed on, drawn toward the ancient oak tree at the center of the park, a spot steeped in local lore. Legend had it that this tree was a portal of sorts, a place where the veil between worlds thinned during storms. The tales spoke of a spirit trapped within its gnarled roots, seeking release. I approached the tree, its massive trunk knotted and twisted, a testament to the years it had endured. I placed my hand against its rough bark, feeling the pulse of life within. Closing my eyes, I listened to the rustling leaves, the distant sound of the wind. "What do you want?" I whispered, not expecting a reply. The wind howled in response, swirling fiercely around me, and for a brief moment I could have sworn I felt a presence beside me. A shadow flickered at the edge of my vision, and I turned quickly, heart pounding. The park was still deserted, yet the air felt charged, as if the very atmosphere crackled with energy. Suddenly a memory flooded my mind, my grandmother's stories of the winter ghost, how it wandered the streets in search of its lost love. My breath caught as I recalled her words, how she had warned me to listen closely, for the spirit could reveal the truth if one was brave enough to seek it. I decided then that I would confront this entity. "If you're here," I called out, "show me what you want." The wind shifted, and I felt a rush of cold air envelop me, as if something unseen were circling. My heart raced, a mixture of terror and exhilaration. Moments later, I noticed a faint glow emanating from beneath the tree. Intrigued, I crouched down to investigate. As I brushed away the snow, my fingers grazed something cold and metallic. I unearthed an old locket, tarnished and ornate. It glimmered with an otherworldly light, as if it contained secrets long buried. I opened it carefully, revealing a faded photograph of a young couple. The man bore a striking resemblance to the figure I had seen outside my window. My breath hitched as I realized this was him. But where was she? The absence of her presence felt like a void, a haunting reminder of what was lost. "Is this what you seek?" I murmured, holding the locket up to the light. The wind surged around me, intensifying, carrying a sorrowful wail that echoed through the trees. "You're looking for her, aren't you?" As if in response, the air grew colder, and a shadow flickered just beyond my line of sight. I turned quickly, my heart racing. Was it just my imagination, or was something truly watching me? The feeling of being followed crept back in as a weight pressed against my chest, stifling my breath. I rose to my feet, clutching the locket tightly. The wind roared, almost angry, pushing me back as if urging me to leave. Panic surged within me, but I resisted the urge to flee. "No," I shouted against the howling gusts. "I won't run." Suddenly, I caught a glimpse of movement in my peripheral vision. A figure emerged from the swirling snow, more solid than before, a woman, her face pale and ghostly, her eyes filled with despair. She looked at me, and in that moment, I felt her anguish wash over me like a tidal wave. "Find me," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the roar of the wind. "Help me find peace." The moment passed as quickly as it came. The apparition dissipated into the storm, leaving only the howling wind and my racing heart. I stood frozen, the locket clutched tightly in my hand, realization dawning upon me. This was my calling, to uncover the truth of this tragic love story, to free the spirits trapped within the storm. As the wind began to die down, I knew my journey had just begun. I needed to uncover the past, to learn the names behind the faces in the locket, to discover the fate of the lost woman and the love that bound them. The city held secrets, and I was determined to unveil them, no matter the cost. With renewed purpose, I turned back toward the path leading out of the park, the locket glowing softly in my palm. The whispers of the winter wind guided me forward, and I was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, even if it meant facing my own fears along the way. As I left the park, the weight of the locket in my pocket felt like a promise, a key to a mystery that had waited too long to be uncovered. The city around me seemed different now, the familiar streets transforming into a labyrinth of shadows and whispers. The once inviting buildings loomed like silent sentinels, their dark windows reflecting my anxious thoughts. I hurried down the main street, thoughts racing through my mind. Who was she? What had happened to her? The need to discover the truth burned within me, igniting a fire that pushed aside the fear that had wrapped around my heart like a vice. With each step, I felt the chill of the winter air biting at my skin, but it was nothing compared to the coldness of the mystery that lay ahead. I pulled out the locket again, its surface gleaming dimly against the dull winter light. The photograph, though faded, revealed a couple wrapped in each other's arms, lost in a moment of pure joy. The man, his features so familiar, reminded me of the figure I had seen outside my window. But the woman beside him was a stranger, her smile radiant yet haunting. Determined to find her identity, I recalled the stories my grandmother had told me about the history of the city. Perhaps I could visit the local library, a place rich with records and archives, where whispers of the past lingered like dust motes in sunlight. I quickened my pace, my breath visible in the frosty air, the urgency propelling me forward. The library, a grand old building with towering columns and weathered stone, stood at the end of the block. As I entered, the familiar scent of old books and polished wood enveloped me, offering a comforting embrace amidst the chaos of my thoughts. The silence was almost palpable, broken only by the soft rustle of pages turning. I made my way to the archives, a section tucked away in the back, where the past seemed to linger longer. Rows of dusty shelves held bound volumes of history, newspapers, birth records, and marriage licenses. I began my search, pulling out one book after another, sifting through the fragile pages with care. Hours slipped by as I lost myself in the stories of the city's inhabitants, each name and date intertwining like a web. Yet, no matter how hard I looked, I couldn't find the woman from the photograph. Frustration gnawed at me as I turned page after page, the light outside dimming into a cold twilight. Just as I was about to give in to despair, a name caught my eye, Eleanor Hartman. I froze, the name resonating like a bell tolling in my mind. I quickly flipped back to the page, my heart racing. There she was, Eleanor, a local artist who had lived in the city decades ago, known for her vibrant paintings and warm spirit. The article described her as a beloved figure, cherished by the community, until one fateful winter when she vanished without a trace. The details were sparse, the town left in shock. The last sighting of her had been near the park, on a snowy evening much like this one. The article hinted at a love affair, suggesting that her disappearance was connected to a man who, as fate would have it, matched the face in the locket. I felt a surge of adrenaline course through me. This was it. I had found the link. I scoured further, desperate for any clues that might lead me to uncover the mystery surrounding her disappearance. Another newspaper clipping caught my attention, detailing the search efforts that followed her vanishing. Her lover, identified as a young poet named Thomas, had been devastated. He had roamed the streets day and night, calling her name into the unforgiving winter wind. Tears welled in my eyes as I read on. He believed she had been taken by the very spirit of winter, a legend that had gripped the town for generations. The article spoke of his despair, of how he had wandered until his own disappearance became part of the legend, leaving behind only his poetry, soaked in sorrow and longing. I needed to know more. I needed to find out if Thomas had left anything behind, perhaps clues that would guide me to Eleanor or reveal the nature of their tragic love story. I searched the shelves for collections of his poems, feeling a sense of urgency flood over me. The whispers of the wind echoed in my mind, urging me to dig deeper. After searching for what felt like an eternity, I finally discovered a small collection of his work tucked away in the corner of the archives. The spine was cracked, the pages yellowed with age. As I flipped through, I found poems filled with passion, longing, and heartbreak, each word resonating with the pain of lost love. One poem, titled "In the Embrace of the Winter Wind," sent shivers down my spine. The verses spoke of a love that could transcend even death, of a promise to find one another against the odds. Each line drew me in, weaving a tapestry of emotion that echoed Eleanor's plight. The last stanza hit me hard, describing a final meeting beneath the ancient oak tree. When the winds howl and the snow drifts high, I shall search the world until the day I die. It felt like a direct plea from Thomas to anyone who would listen, perhaps even to me. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a sign, a guidepost illuminating my path. The oak tree, the same tree I had visited earlier, was central to their story. I had to return there to connect the threads and perhaps uncover the truth that lay buried beneath the layers of time and snow. With the fading light, I left the library, clutching the locket and the book tightly. The wind howled outside, a familiar voice calling me back to the park, where the secrets of the past awaited. The snow fell heavier now, blanketing the world in white as I stepped into the chill, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. With each step toward the park, the city transformed around me, each shadow whispering, each gust of wind a reminder that the past was not finished with me yet. I could feel the spirits of Alina and Thomas guiding me, their love story intertwining with my own fate, drawing me closer to the truth hidden within the winter storm. The park loomed ahead, a stark silhouette against the darkening sky. The heavy snowfall had transformed the familiar landscape into a serene, yet eerie wonderland. As I stepped through the wrought iron gates, the crunch of snow beneath my feet broke the stillness, each step echoing like a heartbeat in the cold air. The ancient oak tree stood at the center, its gnarled branches heavy with snow, creating an almost ghostly figure against the pale backdrop. I approached it cautiously, the locket still clutched tightly in my palm. The wind howled through the branches, a mournful sound that seemed to resonate with the echoes of the past. It felt as if the tree was alive, watching, waiting. As I reached the base of the oak, I noticed something unusual, a small, weathered stone partially buried in the snow. Curiosity gripped me as I knelt down to uncover it. With trembling hands, I brushed away the snow, revealing an inscription etched into the stone. My breath caught in my throat as I read the words, "For Elena, whose spirit dances with the wind." The message sent chills down my spine. This had to be a marker, perhaps a place of remembrance for her, left by Thomas or someone who had loved her. I looked around, half expecting to see the figures of Alina and Thomas appear before me, trapped in their eternal dance. But all that surrounded me was the whispering wind and the soft falling snow. I felt a deep sense of connection to this place, as if the very air held the weight of their love and loss. I closed my eyes for a moment, allowing the chill to seep into my bones, urging me to listen closely. Suddenly a strange sound broke through the howling wind, a soft, melodic humming. It was faint, yet it resonated with a haunting beauty. I opened my eyes, scanning the area for the source. The sound seemed to swirl around me, weaving through the branches of the oak, wrapping me in an ethereal embrace. I stood, feeling a magnetic pull toward the tree. It was as if something or someone was beckoning me closer. I reached out, touching the rough bark, feeling the pulse of life beneath my fingertips. The humming grew louder, intertwining with the wind, a song of sorrow and longing that spoke to my very soul. And then I saw it, a shimmering figure materializing between the branches, ethereal and graceful. It was a woman, her form translucent, draped in a flowing gown that billowed like mist. Her hair danced around her face, wisps of silver that caught the light of the fading sun. I felt a jolt of recognition. It was Elena. My heart raced as she floated toward me, her expression one of deep sadness, but also a serene acceptance. I wanted to reach out to speak, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I stood frozen, mesmerized by her presence. Elena, I whispered, the name barely escaping my lips. She smiled gently, and in that moment I felt the weight of her sorrow. The wind picked up, swirling around us as if trying to carry her words to me. I could almost hear her voice, soft yet clear, echoing through the air. "Help me find him," she seemed to plead, her gaze piercing through the veil of time. A rush of emotions surged within me, fear, compassion, and an overwhelming need to aid her. I nodded, though she could not see me clearly. I knew then that my purpose was not merely to uncover her past, but to help reunite her with Thomas. The wind howled louder, swirling around us, carrying the icy chill that enveloped my body. Elena's figure flickered, her essence wavering like the flame of a candle in a draught. I could sense the urgency, the desperation in her presence. It was as if time was running out, as if the storm itself was a barrier between their souls. "Where do I find him?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling in the face of her ghostly beauty. Her expression shifted, a flicker of hope in her eyes. She pointed toward the path that wound deeper into the park, the snow swirling in a vortex where she directed me. "Follow the wind and you shall find the truth," her voice echoed in my mind, intertwining with the melody that resonated around us. With a sudden gust, she vanished, leaving only the howling wind and a deep silence in her wake. I felt the weight of my promise pressing upon me, urging me to act. I turned toward the path, determination setting my heart aflame. As I walked, the wind guided me, swirling around my body, whispering secrets of the past. I felt a connection to Thomas, as if he too was searching for Alina, his spirit intertwined with hers in a dance of longing and despair. I followed the path as it twisted and turned, leading me further into the park, away from the familiar and into the unknown. The shadows deepened and the trees loomed like dark sentinels, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The air grew colder and I shivered, the chill gnawing at my resolve. Then, as I rounded a bend, I saw it, a small clearing surrounded by trees, a hidden glade that felt alive with energy. In the center stood a weathered bench, half buried in snow. It was here, I realized, where Thomas might have waited for Alina, where their love could have bloomed even in the coldest of winters. I approached the bench cautiously, scanning the ground for any sign of him. As I knelt down, brushing away the snow, I discovered a small, crumpled piece of paper tucked beneath the seat. My heart raced as I unfolded it, revealing a poem scrawled in elegant handwriting. "Alina, my love, in the winds you reside. When the snow falls softly, in dreams you abide. I'll search for you always through storm and through night, until the stars guide me to your radiant light." Tears filled my eyes as I read the words. This was Thomas's plea, a promise etched in time, a testament to his enduring love for Alina. The wind picked up again, swirling around me, carrying the weight of their emotions. Suddenly the ground trembled slightly beneath me, and I felt an energy pulse through the air. I looked around, sensing that something profound was about to happen. The wind howled louder, and I felt it wrapping around me, enveloping me in its cold embrace, urging me to take a leap of faith. "Thomas," I called out, my voice strong against the storm. "Alina is here. She's searching for you," the wind responded, swirling in a vortex, and I could feel the weight of their love filling the air. As if answering my call, the atmosphere shifted. A soft glow emerged from the shadows, illuminating the clearing. I held my breath, the sensation of magic mingling with the winter chill. The figures of Alina and Thomas began to materialize, drawn together by the unseen threads of their love. In that moment, everything felt right. I stood witness to their reunion, their spirits intertwining as they reached for one another, a beautiful dance of light and shadow, warmth and cold. The air hummed with a melody that transcended the storm, resonating with the truth of their bond. As they embraced, the wind calmed, and a profound silence enveloped the glade. I felt a weight lift from my heart, a sense of peace washing over me. I had not only uncovered their story, but had helped restore their love, bridging the gap between the past and the present. With the realization that their spirits were now free, I stepped back, allowing them their moment. The storm began to fade, the snow falling gently as if celebrating their reunion. I could sense the warmth of their love radiating through the air, a reminder that even in the coldest of winters, love could endure. As I turned to leave, a soft whisper danced on the wind, echoing through the trees. Thank you, it seemed to say, and in that moment, I knew I would carry their story with me always. The ghost of the winter wind had transformed from a haunting presence into a beautiful memory, woven into the fabric of the city and my own heart. You made it to the end of the stories. That means it's the perfect time to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And if you haven't already, leave a like and drop a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have a great time relaxing and good night.